Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever stopped to think about the invisible architecture behind your education? Well, today we're going to be forensic architects. We're peeling back all the layers on one of the biggest questions out there. Who actually decides what gets taught in our schools? Let's get right into it.
So who is it? Who decides what you learn in school? I mean, is it your teacher? The principal? Maybe the government? The answer, it turns out, is way more complex. And honestly, more fascinating than you probably guess. It's this amazing story of competing ideas, power structures, and constant change. So let's start our investigation with the piece of evidence we've all seen.
You know, every single school day is built on a foundation that looks something like this, the good old lesson plan. It tells a teacher what to teach, how to do it, and how to check if the students got it. It really feels like that's the whole story, right? But it's not. Not even close.
See, that lesson plan is really just the very last page of a huge, incredibly complex architectural blueprint for learning. So to figure out who the real architects are, we need to zoom out. We have to trace this thing all the way back to its origins. And our first stop is figuring out what this blueprint even is.
Okay, so the official name for this blueprint is the curriculum. We hear that word all the time, but what does it actually mean? Well, the definition is probably a lot broader than you think.
One of the earliest definitions, and one of the widest, comes all the way from 1935. An educationalist named Hollis L. Caswell said it's, quote, all the experiences children have under the guidance of teachers. Just think about that for a second. That's not just the subjects and the tests. It's the school plays, the rules in the hallway, the whole vibe of the classroom. It's all part of the curriculum.
Later on, people like Hilda Taba came along and gave this idea a little more structure. Her point was that a curriculum isn't just something that happens by accident. It has to be a deliberate, structured plan. It needs to have clear goals, the actual stuff being taught, the methods for teaching it, and of course, a way to measure if any of it actually worked. So it's a whole system from start to finish.
And this brings us to a really important distinction. The what versus the how. The curriculum is the what. It's the blueprint, the content, the grand plan. Instruction, on the other hand, is the how. That's the actual methods and strategies a teacher uses to bring that blueprint to life in the classroom. So you can think of it like this. One is the map, and the other is the actual journey.
So, if the curriculum is a plan, who are the master architects drawing the whole thing up? Well, it turns out there isn't just one. Nope. Instead, there's been this long-running battle between two major schools of thought. Two totally different visions for what education should even be for. On one side, you've got essentialism. This is the more traditional view, right? The idea that education is all about passing down essential knowledge. The classics, core math, hard science. Here, the subject matter is king, and the mind is treated like a muscle that you have to discipline. But on the other side, you've got progressivism. Thinkers like John Dewey champion this. Here, the student is at the absolute center. Learning isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about getting your hands dirty, solving real-world problems, and learning by doing. And believe me, this isn't just some dusty academic debate. For more than 100 years, these two philosophies have been in a constant tug-of-war for control over the educational blueprint. The kind of school you went to wasn't designed in a bubble. It was a direct result of this ongoing battle, with the power shifting back and forth over the decades.
But it's not just about these big, abstract philosophies. The blueprint is also shaped by a very real, very complicated power structure that builds up layer by layer by layer.
Okay, so decisions about what you learn are made at so many different levels. It's like a chain of command. It starts right there with the individual teacher making choices every single day. But then you zoom out and you've got the whole grade level team, then the entire school, then the school district, and then all the way up to the state, which sets the big, broad standards for everybody. And the pyramid just keeps getting bigger. National policies, things like federal funding, can totally influence what states and local districts decide to focus on. And get this, even international stuff, like how US students score on tests compared to kids in other countries, can create pressure to go back and change the entire blueprint. So let's fast forward our investigation into the 21st century. Because a powerful, and I mean powerful, new architect has just walked into the room and is busy redrawing everything. And that architect is technology. And the shift is just dramatic. The 20th century blueprint, that was all about being teacher-centered. It was about you. by yourself, memorizing stuff from a single textbook. Today's blueprint is pretty much the polar opposite. It's student-centered, it's collaborative, and it's all about critical thinking using this endless universe of digital and online resources. The expectations have been completely flipped on their head.
This massive shift has given rise to a whole wave of new trends that you've probably heard of. We're talking about things like personalized learning that actually adapts to how fast each student is going, or blended learning that mixes online stuff with in-person class time. These aren't just buzzwords. They are literally the new tools being used to redraw that educational blueprint. But here's the catch. Here is the huge challenge. 15 years. That's the typical amount of time it takes for our education system to really adopt a major new technology. In a world where a new iPhone comes out every year, our schools are in this constant, frantic race to keep the blueprint from becoming totally obsolete.
So, what's the big takeaway from our little investigation here?
We've seen that curriculum is this battleground of big ideas. It's a product of all these layers of power. But I think the most important thing to remember is this. The blueprint is never, ever finished. As one of the core sources for this explainer puts it, change is both inevitable and necessary. And that just applies so perfectly to education. Our school systems, just like any living thing, have to adapt to survive and thrive. A curriculum that stays the same forever is a curriculum that's basically dying. Change isn't the problem here. Change is the whole point.
So what this really means is that we have to think of the curriculum as a living, breathing document. It is always a product of its time, constantly being tweaked and revised by social changes, new scientific research, and of course, the crazy pace of technology. The job of drawing this blueprint is never really done.
And that, of course, leaves us with the ultimate question. Since we know this architectural blueprint for learning is never going to be final, that it's always being redrawn, it means we all get to be part of the conversation. So, what skills, what knowledge, what values are so important, so essential, that they absolutely have to be on the next one? What do you think should be on it?